What happens when a billionaire CEO goes undercover in his own company, only to get fired for being unproductive? That's exactly what happened to Daniel Carter, the cold, calculating head of CarterTech Industries. He built his empire from the ground up, and in his mind, no one worked harder than him. So, when his executives started complaining about harsh workplace policies, he made a bold declaration. If I can do it, anyone can. To prove his point, Daniel disguised himself as a new entry-level worker. His goal, to expose the so-called lazy workers and crush complaints once and for all. But Daniel had no idea that his own rules would turn against him. And when his managers decide he's not worth keeping around, he faces the ultimate humiliation, getting fired from his own company. Let's see how it all unfolded. Daniel Carter sat at the head of a long, gleaming conference table, surveying his executive team with an air of supreme confidence. CarterTech Industries was his creation, a multi-billion-dollar software giant that dominated the market. He had built it from the ground up, and in his mind, no one worked harder than he did. His employees were just cogs in the machine, replaceable, expendable, and paid well enough to keep their mouths shut. But lately, the complaints had been piling up. Employee morale was plummeting, turnover rates were soaring, and his executives, especially his COO, Martin Ross, kept pushing him to reconsider his leadership style. Martin sat across from him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The numbers don't lie, Daniel. People are quitting at record rates. We're losing top talent to competitors who offer half the salary but twice the respect. If we don't change something, this company is going to bleed out. Daniel smirked, then let them leave. If they can't handle the pressure, they don't deserve to work here. A few executives exchanged nervous glances. Martin exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You wouldn't last a week under these conditions. The room went silent. Daniel leaned forward, eyebrow raised. Excuse me. You heard me, Martin's voice was steady. You sit up here in your glass tower, making decisions that affect thousands of people without ever stepping foot in their world. You have no idea what it's like to work at CarterTech as anything but a CEO. Daniel laughed. So, what, you think I should take a little vacation in the trenches, work a 9 to 5 like a common employee? That's exactly what I think, Martin said. 1 week, no special treatment, no one will know who you are. You go in as an entry-level worker, and if you make it to the end without quitting or getting fired, I'll back off about the policies. Daniel's smirk widened. And if I fail? Then you start listening, for real this time. The other executives were frozen, waiting for his response. Daniel could feel the challenge in the air, the silent dare hanging between them. His pride wouldn't let him walk away. I'll take that bet. The boardroom was filled with hushed murmurs. Daniel leaned back, confidence radiating off him. 1 week, that's all I need to prove you're all overreacting. Martin didn't look convinced. But Daniel Carter had never failed at anything in his life. The following Monday, Daniel stepped into CarterTech's customer support center under his new alias, Dan Carlson. Dressed in an ill-fitting button-up and khakis, he carried a cheap messenger bag instead of his usual designer briefcase. The moment he entered the building, the difference was staggering. Gone were the pristine offices and luxury espresso machines. Instead, he was met with the scent of stale coffee, the buzz of fluorescent lights, and the deafening ring of phone lines never stopping. A woman barely looked up from her clipboard as she shoved a headset into his hands. Dan, right, training lasted 10 minutes ago. Take a seat at station 12. Daniel blinked. That's it, no orientation. She gave him an unimpressed look. You're here to answer calls, not run the company. For the first time in years, Daniel felt unimportant. No one was catering to him. No one cared that he was in the room. It was just another day in the trenches. He sat down at his assigned cubicle, adjusting the uncomfortable headset. The software on the screen was outdated and slow. He recognized it instantly. It was CarterTech's own system, one he had pushed into production 2 years ago, despite employee warnings that it was full of glitches. The irony wasn't lost on him. Then the first call came in. Customer support, this is Dan. The voice on the other end was already furious. Finally, I've been on hold for 40 minutes. What the hell kind of service is this? Daniel's confidence wavered. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How can I help? My entire system just crashed. I lost hours of work. I want a refund. Daniel scrambled through the troubleshooting guide, his fingers stiff and unsure. The system lagged, his heart pounded. His scripted response came out mechanical, forced. 30 seconds in, the customer hung up on him. Daniel exhaled. One down. Hundreds more to go. By hour 2, his voice was hoarse. By hour 4, his headset felt like a vice grip. By the time lunch break rolled around, he was drenched in sweat. He expected the other employees to eat in a well-lit cafeteria. Instead, they collapsed into a dimly lit break room, exhausted, drained, silent. Daniel grabbed a cup of coffee and took a sip. It tasted like burnt rubber. "You look like hell," a voice said. He turned to see a man about his age, broad-shouldered, tired-eyed, watching him over his sandwich. His name tag read Ethan. Daniel forced a smile. Rough first day. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, welcome to customer service hell. Daniel wanted to argue, but there was no denying it. This was hell. Any advice? He asked. Ethan smirked. Yeah, quit while you still have your sanity. Over the next few days, the nightmare only got worse. Calls didn't stop. The quota was impossible to meet. If he took too long on a call, a manager hovered behind him. If he rushed, customers yelled at him. And the worst part, he was failing. On the third day, his manager, Lisa, pulled him aside. You're at the bottom of the performance list, Dan. If you don't improve by Friday, you'll be let go. Fired. He had never been fired from anything in his life. He was Daniel Carter. But right now, he was just another struggling employee, drowning in a system he had built. The employees around him weren't lazy. They weren't complainers. They were survivors. He watched a single mother get written up because she answered a phone call from her child's school. He saw a man get denied time off for his father's funeral because he hadn't requested it 2 weeks in advance. He listened as workers whispered about how many of them had lost their health care benefits after budget cuts, cuts he himself had ordered. And yet they stayed, because they had no choice. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt ashamed. Friday came, his final chance to redeem himself. He answered call after call, pushing himself harder than ever, but nothing was enough. By the end of the shift, Lisa approached his desk. He already knew what was coming. Dan, she sighed, I'm sorry, but you're not meeting expectations. He swallowed the lump in his throat. So that's it. She nodded, you can collect your things. For the first time in his career, Daniel Carter was fired. From his own company. Sitting in his penthouse office that night, he felt the weight of the week settle over him. Martin walked in, arms crossed. Well. Daniel exhaled, staring out over the city skyline. I was wrong. Silence. Martin sat down. You want to say that again? I was wrong, Daniel repeated, about everything. Martin leaned back, smirking, and Daniel rubbed his temples, and we need to fix it. Over the next month, Daniel overhauled CarterTech's policies. Quotas were adjusted, wages were raised, sick leave was reinstated, employees were given actual training and respect. For the first time in years, CarterTech's workforce felt heard. And as the company's productivity skyrocketed, Daniel Carter finally understood. A business isn't just built on profits. It's built on people. And he had almost lost everything before he learned that. Daniel Carter walked into CarterTech thinking his employees were the problem. But after getting fired from his own company, he learned the hard truth: he was the problem. And in the end, that lesson made him a better CEO, a better leader, and a better person. What do you think? Would Daniel have ever changed if he hadn't gone undercover? Let us know in the comments. And if you love stories with shocking twists and satisfying karma, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe for more Undercover Boss stories. Comment below, what would you do if your boss had to work your job for a week? Turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload.